All right. If you haven't been to a lunch and learn session before, there are two formats for these. One of them is Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We have a general Q&A drop-in type session, and everyone comes in with a million questions, etc., and we try and work our way through them, either in the chat or live, etc. Tuesdays and Thursdays, we are running in-focus sessions, which are 30 minutes rather than an hour, and we focus on particular aspects in Brightspace. Now, today's session, we want to have a look at the groups tool within Brightspace, specifically using groups and how that works. And the timing for that is really good because we're now in a position at week -4 that our session subject sites from our masters have been provisioned. So what that should mean is that for many of you, you should now see within your session subjects, within your Brightspace dashboard, underneath My Subjects, you should see this filter, Session 2 2024, or as the rest of us call it, 2460. If you have enrollment for subjects, either as convener, coordinator, etc., you should see these subjects distinguishable by their S- and the session code afterwards sitting there. So I'm going to jump into some of these at some point. But what we're going to be looking at is specifically using the groups tool within Brightspace. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the distinction between setting up groups in a master subject site and setting up groups in a session subject site. So we might start with the prospect of doing it within a master site. So let's pick on a master site here. We find the groups tool inside either the subject admin area underneath learner management and groups. Students can see groups, and we can also access it in the same way underneath the communication nested menu. So you can get to it either way. It's exactly the same tool. So let's open up groups. What this brings us to is our Manage Groups dashboard, which will give us a view of all of the groups, and they use this term category, which just means group set. So the term that we had in I2 was a group set or a collection of groups for a specific purpose. In Brightspace, they call that a category. So a new collection of groups. And if I hit my drop down here, it will show me all of the groups that have been created inside this site. At the moment, I've just got the one. And if I deleted that, I now have none. So I've got no groups to find at this point in time. So what I'm going to do here is create a new category or a new group set. Give it a title. Can put in a description, but keep in mind that the description for your groups is not visible to students by default. So this is more of a reference for the rest of the teaching team, for example. There is an option to make it visible, but by default, they'll just get the actual group name. So I'll put in here description if required. This does give you access to the Brightspace editor, the WYSIWYG. So that means that you can either choose to use tools like insert stuff. If you wanted other information available in your group description, you can also use the quick link tool, which will let the students jump to other parts of the subject site. So Nicole, the description area will be visible to the rest of the teaching team and your markers. They'll be able to see it, but by default, it's not visible to students. There's an option to make it visible, but by default, the description is invisible. So in terms of the purpose of the group itself, obviously we've got lots of different scenarios for groups. Some of them are for marking, for example, setting up marking teams, and I'll work through that scenario. Others will be for student activity. So in this case, maybe for this example, I'll set up a student activity. The most important part of the groups tool is understanding the different types of enrollments that we have. And if I zoom in, the first option we've got is creating a specific number of groups with no automatic enrollment. So that means that you manually have to assign each of the users to those groups. Next one we have is groups of a specific number. So that means a cap, and they're automatically created. So that'll split up the cohort, no matter how big it is, into specific number of groups. The maximum number of students or users that you can have in any given group is 200. Right, so you can have 200, up to 200 students, staff, etc., in a group, any particular group, and you can have up to 200 groups inside this tool. So the maximum membership in any individual group is 200, and the maximum number of group categories or collections of groups that you can have is 200. Next up, we've got a specific number of groups and they are automatically created. So if I had 200 students and I said 10 groups, it will automatically create 10 groups with 20 students in it. And it'll never have more than 10 groups. There'll be 10. We might get additional students in and it will keep splitting them up evenly between those groups, but we'll have 10 set groups. Then we get groups with a cap and they enroll themselves. So if we were talking about students joining a group of 5, and then once the group's full, no one else can join. Then we have a specific number of groups and they self-enroll. So if we said 10 groups, you enroll yourselves, they can have as many people in them as they like. Then we get down to quite specific, a specific number of groups with a capacity of X students, and they enroll themselves. So for example, if I said 10 groups, 5 students in each group, and they self-enroll themselves, once we have 50 students enrolled in those groups, no more will be able to add themselves. So that's kind of a first in, best dressed type scenario with no more groups at that point. The last option that we have in the groups tool is single user member specific groups. And this is quite a niche option in Brightspace. What it means is that every student will effectively be their own group. And the reason we have this option is if you're using a tool like the discussion tool in Brightspace for an assessment, and you don't want other students to be able to see the work of their peers, the only way to make it private is to set up this type of group, a single user member specific group. If you do that, the student is submitting in a space where only they can see it, them and the teachers. So that's why that option exists in Brightspace. It's really more about using the discussion tool so that no one else can see what you're putting in there. Because by default, discussion forums, discussion topics are visible to everybody. And that would include accessible items. So the workaround is we have a specific way of restricting those assignments so that only the student sees their work. For this scenario, what I'm going to do here is create some groups that the students sign up to. So in that case, I'm going to set a cap and the students enroll themselves. So I'm going to say I want groups of a specific number. So let's say we can have up to 5. And then I get a choice of putting in a prefix if I wanted to. So if this was related to an assessment task, for example, maybe I'm putting in assessment 2 groups as the prefix. And then let me zoom out a little bit. Then you get some options about when you want enrollment to be able to start. So if you don't want the students from the moment they have access to their subject site to be able to fill up groups, then you may want to consider setting a start date. So quite often we have things for equity, etc. We want the students all to have equal opportunity from a certain point to join these groups. Maybe we set a start date. Otherwise, it's just visible from the moment you create it and they can start joining them. So you can set a start and a finish date for when they're able to join those groups. Now, then there's also an option of if there's an expiry date for when you want anyone that hasn't already joined a group to be allocated. If you set an expiry date for when they can join a group, the system then allows you to determine whether you want anyone else to be automatically allocated. Well, that will only work up until, if there's a cap on the groups, for example, it will just create additional groups to deal with the residue, the leftover students. All right, I can see there's a question there. Is it possible to set up names for each group? Absolutely. So we can get to that in a second once the groups are created for this activity. I'm going to work down here through our additional options underneath. One of them is we can set up a discussion area specifically for each of these groups to utilize. So I'm going to check that box. Where do I want that discussion area to exist? In the main forum or in a different forum? So it depends which forums you've set up in your site. If you've already created, for example, a support forum, an assessment forum, a main forum, you'll be able to find them in this list, or you can create a new forum for it. In this case, I'm going to put this one in underneath an assessment forum, and I'll get it to create a new topic for these groups members to utilize. Then we have an option talking about lockers, and in Brightspace, every student gets 10 megabytes of shared kind of online cloud storage, so to speak, where they can store files in Brightspace. It's called a locker, and in a group, they have a shared locker. So if there are 5 students in this space, in their locker, they'll have 50 megabytes of shared space for them to be able to upload files or even create files in that space. If I hit set up lockers, I'm going to check that box there. It will create that shared space. I'm not going to set up a group assignment from here. If I have a group assessment in mind, I would be suggesting that you get log a Sherwell ticket and get help from an ED to help create those tasks, because normally we create the group separately and then we create the assessment and tie it back to a group. We don't create the assignment from the group itself. If I hit save, it's creating the groups. I can see I've got some questions to get to in a sec, Kel, as well, which I will. What happened to my Q&A? Is there one? Oh, there we go. All right, Nan had asked me about the discussion areas that I want for these groups. Do I want every group to have their own topic, or do I just want one topic where each group has their own threads? I'd suggest this second one is far better in terms of conserving the real estate. What does that look like in the discussion forum? Okay, that's fine as a title, and then I can put in a description in the discussion area if I need to. That'll do. Hit create. It's now creating the topic in the discussion area, and it's created the lockers. Once I hit done, I'll zoom out a little. Looking at my groups dashboard, I can now see there's one group in existence. No one's enrolled yet. It was a self-enrolling group, but it has up to 5 members. This link from this dashboard will take me straight to the discussion forum area where they're posting. And similarly, here's their locker, where I can see which files they're sharing. So it becomes a real dashboard for having a look at that group activity. If I open up group files, it'll show me there's nothing in the locker currently, but they have up to just under 50 megabytes of shared space where they can upload files, where they can create a new Brightspace page, new file in here, or create folder structure, etc., to do that within their locker space. So the locker, in Blackboard, we had the same functionality really with the file share option, but I don't think it was as well laid out as this. All right, I'll take a step back there. Now, Kel, I've got some outstanding questions, so I better get to those.
Yeah, I've had a couple of generic questions, but I'll start with Nicole.
Yep.
When would you do groups in the master compared to the session site?
So that's a really good question. When you set up a group structure that doesn't require individual students to be in there yet, setting it up in the master is the best idea because you'll never have to create it again. They will be carried into your session subject site and be available ready for students to use. So things like self-enrolling groups like we just did there, perfect example. Creating those in the master and just having them provisioned automatically is a really great idea. You won't have to do it again. Groups where you have to rely on targeting to a particular cohort or campus of students, you can't do that until those cohorts exist. And they come into being at week -4 when the session subject site is created. So if I decided that I wanted to make a group activity that only impacted Bathurst distance students, for example, which I would do by creating a new group category. We'll wait for the system to wake up. Here we go. Underneath the enrollment type, there is a restrict enrollments area that allows you to target particular sections of students. That's a specific number of groups, no auto enrollments. I want to restrict this further. Am I in a master site, or I am in a master subject site? So in a master site, there's no students enrolled. We can't see sections. So I can't make groups here that automatically only make it available to a particular cohort of students. If I was in a session subject site, however, and I did exactly the same thing, create a new group, underneath this restriction area, it automatically picks up the sections that exist in the site, which means I can make groups that are only available to particular cohorts of students. So that's an example of group activity that needs to wait until the sections are created. I hope that answers the question. A distinction between the two. If it relies on sections of students, you've got to wait until the session site exists. Yeah, thank you for that. Next one,
And
Kel.
Nicole actually just added marking teams would be done sessionally then.
Look, that's a really interesting point. I've been through the exercise of creating marking teams now in the groups tool with a number of different academics. And one scenario that a number of them are now trying is to actually create a structure for groups that doesn't require particular markers to be enrolled yet or particular students to be enrolled yet. So I'm happy to show you how that looks if you'd like to see what that looks like. You can do it in the master site. And what that involves is thinking about creating, I want a structure where I'm going to create blocks of 20 students. Automatically, it's going to create blocks of 20, no matter how many are enrolled and when they get enrolled. At that point, I'll just have a series of these 20 student blocks that are sitting there waiting. So let's say we'll call it assessment 1 marking teams is the name that I'm going to give to these groups. All right, in this case, I want to actually split this up and say, I want them to be automatically created and I want them to contain a certain number of students. So it's this second option, groups of a specific number or cap. At that point, I'm going to say there's 20 students in each for my example. And I'm not going to put any other restrictions at this point. I'm not going to worry about lockers or discussion areas. I just want to create the groups. At this point, it's going to create those marking teams. Now, because I'm in a master site, there aren't any students in this site yet. But what happens is this will give me a full dashboard of those groups of 20 that I can then allocate 1 block, 2 blocks, 3 blocks to particular markers. They will automatically be populated. And I can just say, Kelly is able to take 3 of those blocks. She can mark up to 60 students. And then that way she takes marking groups 1 through 3. And then Sid, for example, might only be able to take 1. I'll say, right, Sid, you're taking marking group 4. And this will automatically split the groups, the students into those marking blocks. This structure I can set up in the master and leave it, and it will carry into the session site. And all I have to worry about is telling my markers which of the marking teams they are taking. So I'm not sure if that strategy makes sense to you, but I'm happy to show it to you outside this session. If you want to send me an email, I'm happy to walk you through it. But it means that you don't have to create marking teams individually every session. All you need to do is tell your markers which one of the marking teams they are taking. 1, 2, 3, 4. It'll automatically split them up. Next one, Kel.
Yep. Dan's asked, does the system keep track of dates when people enroll themselves and post things?
Oh, that's a really good question. Let's see what I can see. If we go back to our groups dashboard and I look at the membership, who's in particular groups. All right, there's nothing in here about timestamps for when they joined or when they were allocated. I think the activity has to be logged in the system somewhere, but we may have to get back to you with exactly how you get that kind of report. It doesn't appear to be within the actual group's dashboard. I don't think it's going to be in class progress either. That's like a user activity report. Maybe. We'll have to get back to you with that one. Sorry.
Thank you, Lachlan. We're using a Padlet right now where the students sign up to do oral presentations.
Right.
And then they are to upload their PDFs. So we can keep track of when they've done it, whether they've done it by the due dates. And it was suggested from the session that I watched the other day that maybe groups might be a way to organize them signing up for this. But anyway, I don't need to know until the end of the semester, so I have time to figure things out.
No worries. Well, hit me up again. I'm happy to walk through some options around how we might want to do that.
Thank you. We might talk tomorrow with our chemistry group. Thanks.
No problem. Thank you. All right. Other questions, Kel? I know there's probably going to be plenty.
Few, yep. Is the 10 megabytes per subject for each student or just an overall allocation?
It's per student, right? So if you have a group of 2, there'll be 20 megabytes shared space. If there's 5, it'll be 50 megabytes. So it's per student in each subject. Now, you have an individual locker that sits there that is 10 megabytes. That's not to be confused with a group locker. It's every time you create a locker within a group, it creates a whole new locker with a whole new 10 megabyte allocation.
All right. Sue would just like to know, how do students submit assignments in Brightspace?
Right. So their assignments, they would be submitting underneath the assignment dashboard, underneath assessment. So that's we cover that in the engage assess sessions, but basically your students will be coming into the assignment area, finding the assignment that they need to submit. So for example, if they were a student in Bathurst Distance and this has been set up properly, they'll be able to see this portal, come in and submit their assignment from that link. But it happens underneath the assessment menu in their subject site. Next one, Kel.
Yep. And Jamie was just asking about changes, whether to make them in the master or the subject site. More specifically, if there are contents and assessments that need to be changed, will it be okay if the session site is now different from the master site?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The best thing I can show you, Jamie, to be honest, is how to copy information backwards and forwards between them. In an ideal world, everything was set up perfectly in the master before Tuesday and it just got copied across. However, obviously, people are making changes in session. Some people are doing it now. You'll make other changes throughout the session. Anything that you need to copy back into the master so that you don't have to set it up again individually the next time, you need to use one function inside Brightspace, which is called subject admin import export copy components. And this function, you need to know how to do it. It's really important. Underneath site resources, import, export, copy components, and you start by going into the destination. Where do I want the content copied to? So once you're in the destination, select that option. The very first thing you're going to see in there is this option to copy components from another org unit. All this means is copy stuff from another subject. That's it. Then we get to search for which subject we want to get it from. So we put in a subject code here. I'll pick on medicine and it'll show you whether it's a master site, whether it's a session site. So let's say I want to pull something from session 31 where these guys have been teaching into my current site. I'll pick on that one, hit add selected. Then it's going to say copy everything in that subject, and you really don't want to do that. We want to click on select components. Yep, I really want to do that. And now it shows me a list of everything that is in that site, whether it's content that I want to copy back, whether it's assessments that you've set up, discussion areas, maybe it's announcements that you sent, or quizzes, or question libraries, or rubrics. You can copy any individual item from that site back into your master, for example, or into the destination site. In this case, what I'm going to pick on is a particular piece of content. Let's say I've added a new folder of content in my session site, and I want to pull it back into the master. So I'm going to pick on content. I don't want to copy all of the content. I only want to select an individual item. So continue from here. At that point now, it shows me my content structure from the site that I'm pulling this content from, the source. Let's say that what I wanted to add was this block 5 folder that I'd created. If I want to, I can open it up and see all of the subfolders and even down to the individual pages that have been created inside that subfolder. But in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I want just this one page, and it will create the top level folder, the subfolder, and pull that item across. Hit continue. Ignore this garbage about offset dates. We don't need that. We only want 3 items that are coming out of 423. Finish. It's now copying those for me. The process is very quick unless you're trying to do it on the same day when all of the session sites are being created. Otherwise, it'll be pretty quick. We'll wait for that to update. It's done, and it will be the bottom item in your content list. So if I hit content, there it is. There's the top level folder. There's the subfolder. There's the page. Okay, so it has, that's interesting. They've got a page that doesn't work embedded in their content, but anyway, we'll ignore that. It's copied those items across from the source. So you need to get used to that, the copying function. It's really, really handy and simple to do. Doesn't require you logging a job and waiting for, to get a resource allocated to do it. You can do it yourself, as long as you have access to both the destination and the source, those 2 subject sites. Kelly.
All right, question from Monique. Can you please clarify the options in set up discussion areas, creating a topic, attach an existing topic?
Yeah, absolutely. Ideally, with groups, the same applies in a couple of different ways, really, but I would always be setting up my discussion structure first, the way that I want to use it, particularly the forum structure. If you can establish that in the master site, perfect. But otherwise, do it in the session site. Set up your discussion structure first at the forum level and your topic level. So let's say I had in mind that I'm going to be creating a group assessment, for example. And part of that group assessment is I want them to have a discussion area where they do it. I'm going to create a topic in this forum that I'm going to say is specifically for this assessment that I'm setting up. Assessment 3, group assessment, whatever. All right, it's sitting there. It's sitting inside the assessment forum. I'm not going to worry about grading it at this point. We'll leave it here. I'm just going to create the topic structure first, so it sits there. So if I hit save and close now, that's now sitting there, assessment 3 group assessment. So I've established that first. Now, if I go in and create my groups, and I'll create a new category, a new group set for assessment 3. I'm going to say that this is one that they sign up for themselves, I suppose, or we automatically create it. Let's create one where we automatically create it. I want to say I'm going to set up groups with 5 in each and create it automatically. And in fact, maybe I'll restrict this to Bathurst distance students if it was an activity just for them. All right. This option to set up discussion areas allows me to choose which forum. So we set it up in the assessment forum, and I want to attach it to an existing topic because I created the topic in advance. Now it's already identified the topic itself, and I can hit save, and they will post where I want them to post for that activity. If not, and you chose the other option to create a new topic, that's fine. It'll just do what we did a minute ago in the groups tool. But just for my own thinking, I find it a lot easier to set up the discussion structure first that I can then point them towards. The other thing is as well, when you have that in place already with the discussion tool, it means that you can start using the quick link option in Brightspace to point students to that discussion area. So I'll show you that now, if just to show you what I mean. We'll link it to that discussion, so that's fine. Those students now in their groups will be able to jump It's setting up the groups now, splitting up the cohort automatically. It'll refresh in a second. I don't have that many students, do I? Okay, great. So there are 3 groups. It's automatically created it, and you'll see that it gives me the link on my dashboard now to jump straight to those discussion topics. So I can use the groups dashboard to jump into them. I could go into my discussion area to jump into them if I needed to. There it is, group 3 assessment. Each of them will only be able to see their own threads in this topic. That's what creating it at the topic level and specifying that option there where they each get their own thread inside the topic. Otherwise, it will create a whole topic for every group and you'll have a really long scroll in your groups area. So you want it to be separated by thread, not by topic. Now, because we've created this topic area in the discussion forum already, I can now get people to jump straight to this from other parts of the subject site. So as an example, in an assessment, any assessment, doesn't matter, I'll edit this one. Anywhere that you have the Brightspace editor available to you, you can now use the quick link tool, which is sitting here in the editor with the chain icon, and I can get the students to jump directly to that part of the discussion forum, the assessment forum that we created, and the assessment topic that we created. This now creates a link directly within the assessment task that will take the students from the assessment description straight to the discussion area where maybe you've been putting resources for this task, maybe there's other discussions going on, but you can use the quick link function anywhere, which means if you send an announcement out, you can put a quick link in it in the announcement, sending them directly to that part of the subject site that you want. And it will work for assessments, discussion, group signups, whatever you like. The quick link function is excellent. I can't say more about it than that. All right, I think I've gone off topic plenty, Kel, so you better bring me back on track. What other questions have we got?
There was a question from Dan. If you're using this for marking, are the markers able to assess the assignments from marking from this group link?
Wow, that's a really good point. There's a few options with marking. One of them is if you have linked a group assessment, I think you're still better off going into your assignment dashboard to mark the group assignment. So if we open up assignment area and we go into any assignment really, let's jump into one that's got some submissions already. This will do. Underneath your submission view in your assignment dashboard, you can filter the view by users, by cohort, so you can restrict it to only show Bathurst distance students, for example, or groups. If you've set up marking teams already in your group structure, then that means your markers can come in and go users, show groups, and then it will actually pick out which group you want to see. So if I only want to see those that I'd allocated to my first marking team, it now has restricted the view and my markers only have to worry about marking these papers. So still start from the assignment dashboard and then filter the view down to groups and then marking team. I think there needs to be some documentation put in place, probably knowledge articles around how to mark within groups. That relies though on marking teams having been set up first, obviously. Next one, Kel.
Yep. Dan again, I'm just looking to create a topic blogs for discussion. It appears from what you've said that he should create a blog forum with individual discussions for blog 1, blog 2, etc.
I would create those as separate topics in your discussion forum. So make sure you've got a forum in your discussion area for assessment overall. And then within the assessment forum, have a different topic for each of those submission areas that you want from them.
Thank you. That's what I meant. Thank you.
No problem.
All right, I think that's up to date at the moment, Lockie.
Perfect. And I'm only 7 minutes past time. Excellent. Have we got any other questions at that point, folks? Or can I show you anything else happy to stay for a few minutes if that would be of assistance. I will stop the recording though. I can do that.